And welcome back to Gold Shields, the true crime podcast that gives you the best, most compelling cases direct from the mouths of the detectives and investigators who made those cases. And today is no exception. We have an exceptional guest who's going to speak about a case that is very eye-opening, a world most people don't see. But before I introduce him, this is Dan Murphy, along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How are you doing today, buddy?
Great, partner. How are we?
Oh, we're doing great. Very excited to have this guest on today, a longtime friend and former colleague in the NYPD. And before I introduce him, I'll just give a little bit of a background about what today's show is going to be about. During my NYPD career, I was fortunate enough to have spent several years working in the Organized Crime Investigation Division, which is a place dedicated towards investigating specific types of organized crime within New York City. There's Italian, Mafia, La Cosa Nostra. There are other ethnic groups and other entities that are considered organized crime. But in New York, when you think of organized crime, you think of the Mafia. And that's specifically what we're going to hear a little bit about today from former colleague and longtime friend, Louie Balestrieri. Louie B, we called him, and Louie B did everything from undercover work to high-level investigation work with wiretaps and all that stuff. And today, he's going to speak a little bit about his life and his background and what got him where he was to do this case, but also what it's like to work a very complex, complicated case. And Lou will talk a little bit about the impact of organized crime. You know, most people ride around New York City or they go for a visit and they see restaurants, they see theaters, they see a variety of types of businesses. And they never give a thought for a second as to what are the dynamics at play behind those businesses? Where does all that money go to? Why is New York City so expensive? We're going to learn a little bit about that today from Louie. But, he's a martial arts expert. He is a very, very interesting storyteller. He was a very dedicated and committed cop who had a great police career. And we're very lucky today to have him, my friend, Louie B. Louie, welcome to Gold Shields.
Thank you very much, guys.
It's our pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Likewise.
So, Lou, you grew up surrounded by wise guys. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood that had some of them, but you grew up in a neighborhood where it was real prevalent. Tell us a little bit about that and how that landed you on this side of the coin and law enforcement. Interesting. You could have went either way, couldn't you?
I hit a fork in the road, and thank God I took the right side. Okay. I was born in Park Slope, Brooklyn, which I later found out was Colombo crime family territory. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Persico, Andrew Russo, a lot of Colombo strong organized crime people came from that area. My dad went to school with them. My dad had cousins who were organized crime guys. They were bookmakers, and I was just a kid. I grew up around this. I didn't know anything about it until I got older. Funny story was when I was like 5 years old, my father had a cousin who was he was a bookmaker, and like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, we used to call him Uncle Jimmy. He used to say, hey, Lou, here, take this over here, take this bag, run it down the block and give it to Uncle Mike. Uncle Mike was the guy who ran the candy store. And they would wave at each other, and I would run down the block, and I would hand off the bag. When I came back, Uncle Jimmy would give me $5. And I was like the Pied Piper. All the kids would follow me. I'd go around the corner. I'd buy everybody ice cream. Then my mother said to me one day, where are you getting all this money from? I said, getting it from Uncle Jimmy. Little did I know, I was running the numbers for him down the block, giving it to Uncle Mike. So that was my introduction to organized crime. My dad actually had a real godfather from Sicily. Okay, we called him Zips. And he was in jail, and my father and my grandfather used to visit him. And the day he got out, my dad and my father picked him up, and they went straight to a Cadillac dealer and got himself a brand new Caddy. That's the kind of juice and power these people had.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I moved to East New York, Brooklyn, which was a combination of Bonanno, Gambino, and Lucchese.
Lucchese, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I went to school with organized crime kids, Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to high school, I went to Christ the King High School in Queens, and many of the kids that I went to school with were from Tudor Village, which is in Queens, and Howard Beach, which is in Queens. And these are all, I later found out, all these heavy hitter wise guy kids. And some of them grew up to be not only soldiers, but one particular guy is now a lieutenant in one of the wise guy families. I don't want to mention any names. Before I go any further, I grew up around this. In no way, shape, or form am I a wise guy associate, a wise guy hitman, a made member of organized crime. That's not who I am. That's not what I did. I never received money or gave out information to organized crime people. That's not who I am. They respected me and I respected them. Respect is something that NYPD never involved itself in. They were just all about the power. In my humble opinion, there is very little difference between police and organized crime. We walk with a fence between us, and many times we walk on that fence and we could fall either way. From living in East New York, I moved out to Massapequa Park, Long Island, because my dad thought, we'd have a much better life out there. And we did. However, in Massapequa Park, there were more wise guys living there than where I was living in Brooklyn. And we had Carlo Gambino. He's passed on, so I could talk about it. He lived in Massapequa Park. There were, let me see, we had Ettore Zappi, Anthony Zappi. These are guys that are all passed on. They all lived in Massapequa Park. You had Roy DeMeo. He lived in Massapequa Park. Now, being there, all of these guys, I wound up hanging out with their children, hanging out with their, with their nieces, their nephews. And at one point in time, I wound up working for one of them in a pizzeria. I'm not going to mention who that person was, but he was a very prevalent organized crime guy. But he was my boss. He was a gentleman. These people they don't go out and kill people for no reason like it's portrayed in the movies. They were just, all of these people, organized crime, they run businesses. 80% is legit. It's the 20% of that business that gets them jammed. But I knew about what was going on since I was a young kid. I knew enough. Always keep your mouth shut. You don't see nothing. You don't hear nothing. You don't know nothing. You don't carry tales. That's one of the main things that organized crime people do. So although I can't say I'm part of an organized crime organization, but I did carry on their ways. And my father, a retired cop, he instilled that in his children as well. Okay. And that's how I got my introduction. I was, because I worked for these people that I did, we had, I had these cards to get into any nightclub because of who my boss was. Now, I never flaunted that. Everybody knew the place I was working in was organized crime connected, but we didn't flaunt that. We were just very low key, but people knew. And sometimes you ride along on that guy's apron strings to make things work for you. Very. If you saw Henry Hill in Goodfellas, the way he went into nightclubs and what have you, myself and the guys that I work with experienced that same thing. We were treated like gold because of who our boss was, not because I was doing that stuff, but because of who we associated with.
So, Lou, let me ask you. Yeah, let me ask you. Growing up around there and growing up in that atmosphere with your dad as a cop and having associates like that, how tempting was it not to, or how much inner will did it take not to fall into that world and that lifestyle?
To be quite honest with you, I started to go down that path. When I was 21 years old, I drove a brand new Lincoln. I never had less than $300 in my pocket. This is back in 1978, 79. That was a lot of money. I was making more money than my dad. And I'm going to call what I did was hustling.
Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind, let's move on to, if we can, what made you make the decision to follow your dad's footsteps, join the NYPD, and go that route?
Actually, the organized crime pension plan and their medical coverage wasn't too good. So I got out of the place I was working in, and I wound up getting into the insurance business. And believe it or not, those were shysters as well. They were doing, people think that you must have Mafia to do organized crime. Insurance companies are organized crime. They were ripping people off too. And then one day, I had gotten married, and I was looking for more security. I married a detective's daughter, believe it or not. And I was looking for more security than not knowing where my next meal was coming from tomorrow. And that's what the insurance business is all about, and many other things as well. So I took state trooper exam. I took the NYPD exam. I took all of the police exams. And one day, on a Wednesday night, I got a phone call. I had gone through my investigation and so on and so forth. And they said, "Listen, you want a job?" I said, "Who is this?" He says, "This is police officer so-and-so. I'm an investigator." I said, "You're not lying to me, right?" He said, "Nope. Report down to Brooklyn College Friday morning." And that afternoon, I was sworn in as a cop. And I never turned back.
So that was what, 1984?
It was 7/16/84.
So you got sworn in, did your time in the academy, and came out and landed in the 7th Precinct, Lower East Side of Manhattan, correct?
That's correct.
And you were there for a few years. You really had a good time in anti-crime. I remember you talking about that quite a bit.
I loved anti-crime. If I could have stayed there for my entire career with the same guys, I would have stayed there for 20 years.
Right.
Yep.
Now, for anybody in the audience who doesn't know what anti-crime means, it's kind of a unique NYPD term. It sounds like every cop is anti-crime, right? We're all anti-crime. But anti-crime in a precinct level is the plainclothes unit whose job it is to sneak up on people on jobs and crimes in progress, people carrying guns, unmarked, low-key vehicles. It's a very, very effective way.
By definition, in the patrol guide, it's to prevent and deter violent street crimes while in progress. We did not do any narcotics work. We weren't allowed to touch any narcotics unless there was something attached to it, like a homicide taking place or whatever. But sometimes I rode around in a cab, and sometimes they would do what's called a fly-in. They would send us up to Times Square. We'd work with Midtown South, especially when there were concerts or whatever. We'd ride around in our taxi cab, and you just developed a sixth sense where you could look at a guy and say, "You got to stay with him. Something's not right." And you get real good at this. You look at a car and you go, "Let's stay with this car." You just knew. And 9 out of 10 times, you could also, turning the coin over, you could look at some of these people that were tourists, and you knew before the day's over, these people are going to get robbed because they don't appear to be New Yorkers. they're standing on the corner buying a hot dog with $100 bill in their hand. You don't do that because there's always somebody watching you.
Right.
Another funny story that happened to me while I was on the Lower East Side, I was in what's called NSU, Neighborhood Stabilization Unit Number 1, which encompassed the 1st, 5th, 7th, and 9th precincts. Sometimes they sent me into the 5th precinct. Now, in the 5th precinct was Mulberry Street, Little Italy, and while I was there, my ex-wife's grandfather lived on Elizabeth Street. So he used to meet me on the corner sometimes and bring me a cup of coffee or whatever. Then he introduced me to his friends. I didn't know who his friends were. His friends were some of the top organized crime guys from the Lucchese crime family. And my sergeant pulled up on me one day and goes, "Do you know who you're talking to?" I says, "My grandfather's friends." That was the last time I had that post. I didn't know who they were at the time, but I found out later on that they were top organized crime guys. Capos, to be exact.
Wow.
But
so you did your time in NSU. You're in the precinct. You're doing your anti-crime time. Comes a time when you had an opportunity to move on to the narcotics division in pursuit of a detective shield.
Correct.
Tell us about that.
I worked in Manhattan South Narcotics, and I worked for a boss. His name was Bill Alley. The man was a complete maniac. He was not liked by the average guy because he was a stickler. He was in complete control. I loved the man. He taught me more about narcotics, how to talk to people, how to be an undercover. He was a great guy. And just the stuff that he told me, you cannot find them in any book. This was hands-on work. I potentially was, I didn't go into narcotics as an undercover. People think because you're in plain clothes, you're an undercover. That's not the truth. An undercover is a person that is completely removed from the police computer so they cannot be identified at all as a police officer. They testify under a shield number. They don't go into courts through the front doors. They're completely removed from police work whatsoever. Now, although I was an investigator working in plain clothes, he had pulled me out and he asked me if I would do some undercover work. So I never did it before, and I did some undercover work. I bought 9 ounces of cocaine with another undercover while we were in the apartment. He warned me, let's get in and get out. Don't cause anything. I was going in as the money man, and I got caught up in an apartment with a Dominican and a Sicilian. While in the apartment, we got into a little bit of a tiff, and this guy took a set of butterfly knives and he stuck it right to my throat. And I did not know what to do. He caught me with my drawers hanging. And thank God the other undercover was real cool. And he said, "What are you doing? This is my uncle's man." And snatched the butterfly knife off the guy. He threw it on the table. He says, I said to him, "What are you doing? You're insulting me. How long are you doing this business? Okay, I come here I'm the money man. Nothing happens without me. If I say no, no is no." Now, the guy that was with him stood up. He was a Dominican, and he reached behind his back, and he never showed me what he had, but I swore he had a gun. And I remember my boss saying, "Get in and get out. Don't cause no problems. We want to take this case further." I wound up bullshitting, and we got out of the apartment, went downstairs. We got a positive buy. We believe it was like 9 ounces of cocaine. What happened was this guy was shorting us a couple of grams on the count. Every time, he was skimming off the top, and we caught him. And I was there to tell him not to do it because, I was like the enforcer / money man for the guy's uncle. When we went downstairs, my boss, the lieutenant, said, "No good. You should have lit him up." I said, "Boss, you told me not to shoot him. You told me get in and get out. You want to take?" He got so aggravated at this guy. We went in, we kicked in the door, we locked everybody up. That's the way he operated. But he was a great man to me. I happen to love the guy. Then from there, they broke up. My lieutenant was promoted to captain, and they broke up my team. So I said, you know what? I don't want to work for anybody else. I don't want to travel into Manhattan every day. So I went to Queens Narcotics. And there I covered the entire borough of Queens. I carried, I didn't do any more undercover work there. I did one undercover job. I got my shield, my gold shield. I was promoted to detective in 1990, I believe. And I really didn't like it. They were a different set of cops. They were more prima donna-like. When I was in Manhattan, I was taking 18 felonies a month because we hit the deuce. We could take 30 bodies off the deuce. The deuce is 42nd Street. At the time in the 90s, it was a crime haven. You had prostitution. You had drugs all over the place. And it was a very, very, very tough place to work. But we were taking 30 bodies a day. We went out like a small army. It was amazing the amount of work we did. When I went to Queens, I got there in like October. I had more arrests than my entire team. So I knew this place was going to be, it was just run much different. And I didn't like it there. I stayed there. And then they opened up this unit called HIDTA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking. Now, that was a unit that was put together by the first George Bush, the old man. And what he did was he designated a certain amount of money to the NYPD. And he said, give me 30 of your best detectives. And we're going to break this up into 3 different teams. One was Chinese heroin team. The next was a Colombian team that would just investigate Colombians. And the last team was non-traditional drug gangs. And because I did a lot of work in the 7th Precinct with Asian organized crime and I effected numerous arrests of the Chinese gangs who were moving in. I learned all about Chinese gangs. I learned about Chinese organized crime, and I wrote a paper, an intelligence paper for the NYPD that my captain took into Police Plaza for a big meeting, and I made him look like a star. And when I interviewed this lieutenant, a Chinese lieutenant, who wound up being my boss, he was impressed with what I knew about Asian organized crime. And he snapped me up in a hurry. Now, what he told me was, listen, you already have your detective shield. Would you be willing to be an undercover buying Asian heroin? So I said, well, what's in it for me? He says, well, I can guarantee if you're our undercover, I will give you 2nd grade, which is a promotion within the detective bureau. I'd be bumped up making the same amount of money as a sergeant, supervisor. And I jumped all over it. Okay. And that's where I met Dan the Man Murphy. And very, 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 very sharp detective. What I was impressed about him was he's a big, tall Irish guy that spoke fluent Spanish. I was absolutely amazed at that. And he hooked up with 2 other guys. And these guys, I trusted maybe 4 people in that entire team. When I was doing undercover work out on the street, I entrusted these guys with my life. I knew that those guys would come running, guns a-blazing, if I got into a mess. I didn't trust my lieutenant. I thought he was a complete idiot. He was the guy who brought me into that team. We had other people in the team that were, I didn't trust them at all. I didn't, I knew if I had a problem, I'd be on my own. But Dan Murphy was at the top of the heap. John Kelly was at the top of the heap. Who else? Danny, what's his name? O'Connor. What was Danny's first name? Dan O'Connor.
Jimmy O'Connor.
Jimmy O'Connor, another great guy, rock'em sock'em guy. And we had a female that I worked with in Manhattan South Narcotics, Bridget Whalen. She came from Manhattan Sound Narcotics. She worked for the same lieutenant I did. I knew she was a warrior, and I knew they could make split-second decisions if I got into trouble.
So that was an interesting group. When we first went to that unit, they were pulling people together, and we got thrown into the team for Asian organized crime, or Southeast Asian heroin importation and distribution, working with the DEA. And it was for me, it was a big education, because I had literally never done any work in the Asian community whatsoever in New York City. I had worked in different areas. You had a leg up, and some of the other members of the team had done some work in that area. But for us to try to tap into that very, very difficult to get into stream of movement of money and narcotics, there's a language barrier, there's a culture barrier, there's a distrust of outsiders. It wasn't easy, but we managed to make some inroads, and there came a point in time, and we could probably talk for hours about what happened in that unit, but there came a point in time when you were transferred out to a different unit within the Organized Crime Investigation Division. Tell us about that. And now the circumstances weren't, you didn't want to go there, but this is the lead into the case we want to get into today and really get some meat off of, because it's a heck of a case. And so you got transferred over to one of the headquarters teams, right? And what was that like?
The specific lieutenant that I was working with, I was working for him, and in my opinion, he was clueless as to how things really operated. Now, when I went out and met these guys on the street, I had my own way of getting these people to trust me. I would make them touch me, or I'd touch them. These were all signs for me to develop a good relationship. Now, he wanted me to go out there and buy a taste, see what their product was all about. And I had my own line that I would get these guys in, hook, line, and sinker. And I made them believe I was really who I was. And he wanted me to go out there and buy a little bit and then, buy 4 kilos. It doesn't work that way. And first of all, Asian heroin is not purchased in kilos. It's purchased in units. Okay. The true Asian heroin is called China White, Chino Blanco. And you purchase it in a unit. A unit is 700 grams, whereas a kilo is 2.2 pounds, which is 1,000 grams. So each one of these units, if you purchase them, they had white guy prices, and then they had the Asian prices or the Dominican prices. If you got some of this heroin directly from the Asian Triangle, you could pay $200,000 for a unit. Now, these units also were controlled. They had they'd have a stamp on them for quality control, so you knew exactly who the chemist was that was selling this stuff. And this is all stuff I had to learn. And I had to learn the lingo about, when I spoke to somebody, I told them, don't hit me with the shake and bake, which means they're cutting it too much for me. I need something that had to take a 2 or a 3 hit, which means it could be cut 2 or 3 times. Okay. And if they ask me how I'm checking this out, I either have a pig, which is a guinea pig who's going to test my heroin, or I threw it into a hot box, which is a homemade thing that would decipher how much cut is in that heroin. Now, this is all the stuff I had to learn, and I learned this by speaking to other undercovers. Now, the team that I was in with Dan, we had permission anytime somebody in the city bought China White heroin, they had to notify my team. And 2 investigators or whatever would go down and they'd interview the person that was arrested. And then they would decipher if that guy wanted to be an informant. And if he wanted to be an informant, they would bring me back with my sergeant and those 2 guys, and I would decide if I could work with them to make an introduction for me to purchase the heroin. And this Asian lieutenant was absolutely clueless. He was living in a world of illusion, and we started to knock heads, and he was flexing his muscles, and I found him to be a bit of a liar, and I did him a lot of good favors, and he flexed his muscles, and he didn't like me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. He didn't like me because he didn't like me. And we went nose to nose, and he was the lieutenant, and I was the lonely detective, and I got launched. So to spite me, where did they put me? They put me in a team doing traditional Italian organized crime, which they knew I did not want to do because chances of me running into somebody that I knew were greatly enhanced. And sure enough, that happened. The first case I did, I was put into a team. It was called the Italian bread case. And myself and another undercover opened up a bakery. And we did a lot of footwork. It was the same thing that was done with the private sanitation industry, with the private, with bricks or whatever. Organized crime opened up an association, which was a legitimate corporation that was running organized crime. Okay, and what they were doing was they were telling the owners of the mom and pop stores and supermarkets who they could buy the Italian bread from. Now, that's restraint of trade. Okay, you can't do that. There's these other laws that I just learned doing organized crime called the Donnelly Acts. They have bid rigging and so on and so forth. They would control the price of the Italian bread. And I went into Brooklyn, and I'd go into a store and say, how you doing? We're new in the neighborhood. Me and my brother-in-law over here, we want to bring you our Italian bread. How much you paying for a loaf? Oh, 35 cents? All right, we'll sell it to you for 25 cents. And they say, well, no, we can't buy from you. What do you mean you can't buy from us? The association doesn't allow us to. Well, what association? What are you talking about? The association. What association? Oh, you got to be a part of the association. And I can only carry this bread, that bread, and this bread. So it's okay. Take care of yourself. I come back a week later, 2 weeks later. So listen, I want you to try my bread. Just try it. Okay. See how I'll work out a deal for you. We can't do that. What I would do is I take the other loaves of bread, and I would move them to the side, put all my bread over it, and they would get mad at me. But this time I recorded it, saying that the association does not want us to sell bread. Lo and behold, the punishment going into doing Italian organized crime wasn't good enough. They moved me out of that team, and they stuck me in a team was called HQ1, Headquarters Team Number 1. I got stuck there. This was a team that was known as the Bad News Bears. Okay? Nobody talked to you. Nobody liked you. Okay? When I went into the team, the guy that I was forced to ride with didn't talk to me for 3 weeks. We sat in the same car. We rode in from Long Island. I looked out the window. He drove. He didn't talk to me. It was just unbelievable. Now, this was just pure spite work by the commanding officer of OSID, Organized Crime Investigation Division. He was gonna spank me, and I said, "Okay, do whatever you want. I'll overcome anything you do. You could send me back to patrol as a detective. I can make arrests. I'll make arrests, and I'll make tons of overtime." So I get stuck in this team that is investigating the private sanitation industry. What does the private sanitation industry do? They open up these legitimate corporations which are running felony, organized crime businesses. Okay? And I get stuck in this team. Now, each borough had their own their own organization. There was Manhattan, there was Brooklyn, there was Queens, and in Manhattan they had two of them. There was the Greater New York Tradeways Association. They were all run by organized crime guys. And basically what they did was they determined what stops companies were going to pick up. They determined what the price of garbage was going to be. They just controlled the whole. They had been doing this for 15 years. They controlled the whole industry. And there were some very heavy hitters. It was primarily controlled by the Genovese and the Gambino crime families. And that's how I got involved in it. Now,
so in New York City, for the listeners who don't understand some of the stuff we're talking about really quickly, private carding, private sanitation is very big business in New York City. It's an enormous business. Every business that has a business in New York City, every restaurant, they all have to have private carding.
That's correct.
So you can imagine, if you've ever been in Midtown Manhattan and you've seen all the businesses you're walking past, they've all got to pay somebody to pick up their garbage.
That's correct.
And that is all controlled by organized crime.
That is correct.
And by controlled, it means, right, if you open a business on 48th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue, this guy picks up your garbage. You don't have a choice. This is the guy.
That is correct.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely
and you pay what
correct.
he says.
That's correct.
And in that same restaurant, and let's take it one further, in that same restaurant that you just opened up, you're going to want cloth tablecloths and cloth napkins. Well, the guy that's going to sell them to you and the guy that's going to clean them for you is told to you when you open that. That's who it is.
That is
you don't
correct.
Pick. Right. Everything about that business. You open up a pizzeria. If you open a pizzeria in this section of Brooklyn, this is the guy that's going to get you cheese. This is the guy that's going to get you a sauce. This is the guy that's going to get your dough. This is your soda guy. That's it.
100.
They don't play with that.
Anything that moves in the New York City metropolitan area is controlled by organized crime. Okay, you have to be spoken for. Now, somebody will come in and they will lean on you. Okay, and you'll get to understand real quick what they're talking about. And they will make you join one of their associations, and you'll pay dues to them. And they will, when you had one of these guys in your pocket, so to speak, nobody else would come in and lean on you. So it would be,
right.
For instance, Sammy the Bull Gravano, he controlled windows and I believe concrete. Nothing happened without him getting a piece of it. Okay, and they'd have to come to him because he controlled the unions, and they said, Dan, you need a piece. You got this. All right, we'll give you a little piece of it. You take 15%. Okay, Tom, listen. What are you doing? You're building a bridge this week? Okay, we'll give you, kick back 20%, and we'll give you the rest. And that's the way it worked. It's unbelievable.
And that's a big part of the reason why everything in New York City is more expensive. Everything. There's so many hands in the pot, and it's enormous. It's the way to do, but you can't get business done around it in New York City.
And you think about, Louie, the time frame that you're talking about this in the 90s and throughout the 90s, where organized crime, other than probably the 40s and 50s, was probably at its height with who was running the show in New York City. And then you being in the middle of that, from where you came from and, what's going on in the city at that time, like you just described, must have been very intense to be involved with.
I enjoyed it, I was not the kind of guy who would flake these people, that wasn't me. I knew what they were doing, and they were hanging themselves by getting caught up on a wiretap, by certain things that they were doing, beating up truck drivers. They would say, they'd come to you and say, listen, Tom, you no longer have 2 Wall Street. We're taking that spot over. And you say, the hell with you. That's my spot. You're not taking it over. Well, what happened is the next day you send your drivers over there, and they would get a beating. Okay, and then if that didn't work, the people in 2 Wall Street, they would get a beating until everybody understood who the bosses were. And it would be a specific guy, a specific carding company going to take. And if you had a problem, you went to the association, you sat down, you had to sit down, and you had a key player in one of the associations who was an organized crime guy, and they would divide up the route. They would decide how much these poor people were going to pay and, where the kickbacks went. Now, the guy who paid for this was the poor consumer. That was the worst thing. And in the meantime, they had no idea that this was going on. They just got they were paying $100 a week. Next week, they're paying $250 a week. And they had no place to go. Who do you make a complaint to? You can't. The way our case started was one of these guys, a Carter owner named Salvatore Benedetto, who's now passed on, he got tired of it. So he reached out and he got in touch with the Department of Consumer Affairs, who felt that it was more crime-driven than anything else. And we sent a detective over there. This was prior to me getting into that team. And the day he went down there and investigated, a couple of organized crime guys came in and they gave they smacked around the carding owner. And he did it right in front of the detective. Now, rather than effect an arrest, he wanted to conduct an investigation, and this investigation grew and grew and grew because he introduced himself, or he was introduced to the wise guys as a cousin of the Carter. And he did a phenomenal job. He was an Irish guy, and we would take him and we'd give him Italian words. Oh, what are you doing? Madonna di Garme. He had, we gave him terminology to say, and we told him how to dress and so on and so forth as Italians. But he was fantastic. He was really, really good. But we're the guys who kept him alive. Now, part of the undercover work in this case, I did in that I infiltrated some of their meetings. I infiltrated myself and my partner, Victor Fiabani. We went into one of their weddings, and it was at the Garden City Hotel. We knew through the wiretap that there was going to be a wedding, and we got in there, and we had signals coming out. We had limousines in the parking lot with telescopes on it. And I would come out, I would adjust my tie, or I would smoke a cigarette, or I'd blow my nose. And each one of these things was a signal to the field team that somebody that was part of the case was in there. That was a lot of fun.
It's funny. You tell about what it's like to do a surveillance, and you have to, as much as possible, not stand out, obviously. You can't just stand across the street looking like a cop, staring at a building, writing down numbers of cars that come in. You have to blend into an area. So that you, knowing you, I could see you had fun with that. But it's tough. It's harder than it seems because you don't want to miss anything, yet you don't want to get burnt, and you don't want to raise the setup, as we used to say, raise everything up and have everybody on edge, and then people start leaving and nothing happens. But so you guys are working wiretaps. You've got, well, the wiretap, sitting in the wire room, that's the worst part of the wiretap, right? That's sitting there all day long, waiting for the phone calls, keeping the line sheets and all that stuff. That's the part you don't want to do. You want to be out in the street, right, as part of the surveillance teams. So you did a bunch of that. And you had wiretaps on probably a number of phones. You got informants, you got undercovers, you got all this stuff. And it all comes together. And what's the picture it painted and maybe we've already gone over this, of what was happening in the carding industry. This case went on for a while, and it probably could have went on for a lot longer. Am I right?
Yes, we had 3 impaneled grand juries to hear evidence. We had thousands of hours of wiretaps. We had thousands of photographs. I won't say thousands, hundreds of photographs. Sometimes we would just wait and wait and wait hours on end just to get 2 guys to meet together, to shake hands and hug and kiss, to prove that there was a relationship there. One particular time, I sat and looked at this guy's phone records, which we call LUDs and tolls, local usage daily, and his toll calls. I looked at every phone call he made or he received, and I documented the amount of time he was using that phone to these numbers for 3 years. Do you know how boring that was? But I did it. Mm-hmm. And I sat down with the district attorneys and determined, if you pick up the phone, you call somebody, say, Dan, how are you? What are you doing? So you going over there? I'll meet you at over there. Okay, thank you. Goodbye. You hang the phone up. That was just a friendly call. Tom, listen, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm going to the ball game Friday. I got an extra ticket. You want to come? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, we'll see you there. But when they start talking 20 minutes or longer, it's no longer a friendly call. And that's the parameter that I used to determine that this phone was being used for organized crime business. And therefore, I was able to get probable cause and have a judge sign it to get an intercepted, a wiretap going, which was a pain in the ass, an absolute pain in the ass.
There's so much work that goes into it, and we're talking back in a day when a wiretap meant you were handwriting out the numbers that were being spit out of the pen register, and you're putting them down on little individual index cards and you're grouping them by name, address, phone number, and then it required background checks. You had to run the person's name for a criminal history, to subscribe it to the phone. Then you had to take that and figure out what car they were driving. I mean, there's so much work that goes into it. And then you've got to compile, working with a prosecutor, all of this into an eavesdropping warrant request. You want to get a Title III. You want to listen to this phone, and you have all this evidence and proof that took you a long time to pull together, that now you want to listen to somebody. And that's a very invasive part of our criminal justice system, is the right to listen in on your private conversations. Now, some are privileged, right? If it's a clergy member, husband and wife, those things you're technically not supposed to listen to. You spot monitor, it's called. But for the most part, you're listening in on somebody else's world. And that's an infringement upon their rights, which means you have to prove that you have real reason to do so. And it takes a lot of work. But usually when you tap into the right entities, and organized crime is different than, a one-off or a fraudster. You're talking about an organization, and it's spider webs. It keeps going. You keep learning about more and more new people who are involved in this organization. And so you guys are doing this case. You're learning all kinds of stuff about who's paying off who controls what. And if we could fast forward just a little bit, when you guys finally had the indictment, can you tell us how many people, how many carding companies, how much money was involved? What was the final tally on all this stuff?
The first phase of the indictments, we effected the arrest of 17 carders, and we crushed, I think, 23 carding companies. That was the first wave. Okay. What we did, I'm not blowing my own horn, but I'm pretty good with paperwork and so on and so forth. While the other guys were out in the field doing a lot of surveillance and gathering information that was necessary, it was a big wheel. We were all spokes on the wheel, and that wheel doesn't run without those spokes. I put together, I believe it was 30 search warrants. Now, I think it was about 30. I'm pretty sure. We'll use that as a number. And the way we executed these was we went and we got 300 detectives from all over the city. They came into Police Plaza and they were informed tomorrow morning at 5:00, we're going out into the field. You're going to be given a box and you're going to go out there and we're going to execute these search warrants. Okay. And you'll have a member of our team in there to direct you, and you have a sergeant and a lieutenant who'll take care of so many teams. And I was the guy who put that all together. So when I handed you this box, you knew exactly where to go. There were photographs, there were pictures. You knew who the guy was. You knew the size of his shoes, his underwear, his BVDs. That's what I did. I was very, very in tune to doing that. Now, the following week, we executed the arrest warrants. And we gave out, first of all, everybody was spooked. So everybody was very, very leery about what was going on. They knew something was coming. And then the following week, we executed the arrest warrants, locking up the individuals. And what I did was gave out the boxes again. And you knew anything and everything about these people, which I put together. So you knew his car, you knew his mother's house, you knew his whatever, you knew this, and some of these guys ran. We couldn't get them. And around 4:00 in the afternoon, I think we had like 3 people out of the 17. And we were looking like fools. Once again, the bad news bears were stepping on themselves. So I called my sergeant who was at the headquarters. He was a real good guy, very smart man. Tony Mazziotti, may he rest in peace. He was the best of the best. And I said, Maz, listen, the inspector walked into Ponte's restaurant and he blew the set. He started screaming at people and this and that. Let me go tap dance and do my thing. He says, because we're looking like fools again. He said, all right, do what you got to do. So I walked in there and I said, there was a guy in there, one of the Ponte brothers. I said, Mr. Ponte, listen, my name is Louie Balestrieri, and I don't agree with the way my inspector handled himself. I thought he was very unprofessional, and he told you what we could do to you, and that's not the way I want to go. He told them, I'll go to everybody's house. I'll turn their houses upside down so we could effect the arrest. I'll terrorize your families. I'll do this. I'll do that. That's not the way I roll. I said, listen to me. If you get these guys, this is my pager number, you get them to call me, I'll sneak them into the back of the DA's office with no grief. I'm not going to handcuff them. I'm going to take them in. We'll come in like gentlemen, okay? I think I'm a gentleman. I know who you are. I'm Italian. You're Italian. I want to treat you and the rest of the guys with respect, and I apologize for what went on. And the next thing I know, my pager started ringing off the hook and these guys started turning themselves in. And their attorneys would call me and, I was I was a reasonable guy, and we treated the guys right. They weren't drug dealers. They were organized crime guys. They're basically family guys. But 20% of them is doing the wrong thing. And we didn't flake these people. They got caught on wiretaps. They got caught accepting money that they shouldn't accept. They basically screwed themselves. And, what can you say? Nobody made a complaint. Some of these places that we did the search warrants on had hundreds of thousands of dollars. Nobody stole their money. We took their rackets. We took everything we needed. And at some point in time, at the end of this case, after the 3 impaneled grand juries we did a couple more search warrants later on, a couple of years later. I think the total was almost $300 million that we took in the asset forfeiture phase of this case, which is an awful lot of money.
Wow.
Okay. Now, in addition to that, about a week after this case came down, Rudy Giuliani and Then Commissioner Bratton went to Washington, D.C., and they got $54 million from Clinton to fight crime. But it was based on this case. We got to face the facts. Now, the day we locked everybody up was June of 1995. I don't recall the exact day. Everybody and their mother was interviewing us, taking pictures. We were in the DA's office. We were at the top of the world, all dressed up. We took the guys out on the daisy chains, which I promised them I wouldn't do. But our lieutenant, who couldn't stand us, made my words go down in the river, which I had to apologize. I didn't want these guys. I just want to keep them low. Put them in a truck, send them over to central booking, put them all in the same cage. Nobody will fool with them. That's what you do. You treat people nice. At some point in time, I was looking to get information from these people. Okay? That's the only way there were people that were carting owners that I wanted to be nice to because I knew they were going to be soft. Those are the guys that I wanted to turn and roll.
For the audience that may want to know more about this case, NYPD everybody loves to name their cases, right? This was Operation Wasteland.
Operation Wasteland.
The private carting case. That was, as it stands, the single largest organized crime case in NYPD's history.
That's correct.
Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. And that's saying something because we've been working on organized crime for a long time as an NYPD. But so you were a significant part of an unbelievable historic case. The behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to do these cases is one of the reasons why Tom and I do this podcast. We want to give you the backstage pass, and you've given us quite a good view of the difficulty sometimes it can be just to get a case done. Right? You and I have talked many times over the years, Lou, about working in facilities that are dilapidated and run down on very old equipment and all that stuff. But the case is what matters. You guys did a case that lives on. Now, you have had a chance to do some media about this. And if you don't mind, please share with the audience what that media has been about this case, because it's exciting.
Well, we shot last year 12 hours of a video. It's going to be a documentary video, which we're trying to get one of the big distributors to pick up and sell. It's called Operation Wasteland Deep Undercover. And it explains a lot of the stuff that went on in this case that cannot be put in reports. Okay? A lot of the things that happen, you can't say a lot of the stuff. It really has no evidentiary significance, but the way we got to this point was unbelievable.
You know what, Lou? The one thing that just gets me and is just so intriguing, and probably the main reason that Dan and I started this podcast and this show was to bring attention to what detective work is all about. There's a portrait of it on TV of running around and knocking down doors and car chases and shootouts and all that some people really believe what happens. When in fact, some of the most successful cases out there, be it organized crime, terrorism, narcotics, are boring as hell. You're sitting in a car for 9 or 10 hours watching a group of people. You're sitting on a wiretap for days and weeks listening to phone calls. But it all is a matter of dedication and focus and determination to get the job done. And that's detective work. The satisfaction of locking them all up at the end is, like you said, you're on cloud nine, but the work that people don't understand and don't get can get boring and monotonous. And I'm sure at some point, all of you start to get on each other's nerves because you're cooped up together forever. And, it becomes a tough situation to deal with, but, you're a testament to that work, coming to a point and kind of plateauing to an enormous successful case that you were running. And, it's a congratulations to you for sure. But it's what detective work is.
Today, you have that victory of being able to say that despite all the stuff, despite all the difficulties and the personality issues and the whatever, we'll just call it the crap, you managed with your team of Bad News Bears to climb the highest mountain in terms of sheer volume of assets and impact on an organized crime vertical. One element of organized crime in New York City, you guys basically cut the head off. And that was quite an accomplishment. Well, we sincerely appreciate Tom and I both being on a job. We know the difficulties that you probably, well, we don't know them firsthand, but we know how difficult it can be sometimes. Little problems, little cases, no problems, no cases, big cases, big problems, right? When you want to work, sometimes it's difficult. But thank you. We're going to be, we're going to wrap up for today, Louie. We could talk for hours and hours. No, thank you for coming on and sharing your story and giving us our audience that behind the scenes backstage pass into what it's like to run and be a part of a case that is enormous. This was an enormous case. And thank you so much for it. Can't wait for the media, for the documentary, for anything else that comes out about it, because it's gripping stuff. This is a lot. You didn't even get a chance to get into some of the intricacies of the case because it's just so overwhelming. But thank you for giving us that. And thank you for your service and your career and for your friendship. You've been a friend of mine over 30 years, and I value that very much. And I know we'll talk again soon, but thank you for coming in and sharing this with the audience, Louie. It's been great. It's been a great ride.
I never worked with Tom, but a friend of yours, Dan, is a friend of mine. God bless you, Tom. Dan, the man, I cannot say you're on a pedestal, okay? You're a friend. No. I know you had my back all the time. I can't ask you for more than that. We still are friends, and you'll be my friend and brother to the day I die. And
likewise, Louie. And I knew you had my back too. That's one thing I never had from the first time I met you. This guy's good. This guy's a cop. This guy's he gets it.
It's the way it had to be. God bless you both. Keep doing what you're doing. 1,000,000 successes, and we'll speak soon.
You know what? Things can happen in the job. Things can happen behind the scenes. But the one thing is that no one can ever take away that case from Louie. The hard work, the determination, the dedication of staying focused on such a complex case. No one can ever take that away from him. So it was a pleasure to talk to him and get a truly, like we say all the time, Dan, in one of our brand sayings, what a behind-the-scenes look at a historic case in the NYPD. So thank you, Louie, for that. And Danny, another successful show, my man. We keep plugging away and getting these great guests to talk about these cases that no one knows the true crime story of them. And that's what we want to do here on Gold Shield. So another great day, buddy. And as we always do, pray for all the law enforcement officers out there to make sure they go home at the end of their tour to their families who are proud of them and love them very much and be safe during their tours. So you could always go, like we always say, on thegoldshieldshow.com, read about Dan and I, read about our great partners that we have and what they bring to the table in law enforcement and mental health. And they're great friends of ours, and we're proud to have them as part of the show. So for this episode, for Louie B, for my great friend and partner, Dan Murphy, this is Tom Smith for Gold Shields, and everyone out there, please stay safe.